Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to our public meeting on the Chapala Street Underground Utility Assessment District. My name is John Iwasiak, Principal Civil Engineer with the Public Works Department. We've been working with the neighborhood for approximately 2 years now to get to this point of information and fact-finding, and we have some very good information to share with you today. And so you will be able to watch this video online. This session is going to be recorded and will be available online later this week, and it'll be available to you to review, and of course it'll also be available to those who are not able to be here. At the end of this meeting and this week, we'll be putting together meeting minutes and disseminating them in addition to all the information that we will be handing out to you today, so that those who are not here will have the same information so that they can be as informed. We will have several items to share with you on the agenda. Next slide, please. And our agenda is the project status. We have the assessment engineer with us today. I'd like to introduce Joan Cox from Harrison Associates. Joan has been doing assessment engineering for decades, and I consider her the prominent assessment engineer in the state, and she's successfully completed many assessment engineering reports in the state, and she's our go-to person with regards to how to get assessments done in a manner such that they will be valid and least contested. She's been again, the guru, the go-to person for assessments in the state. We have Mr. Bob Samario here, the interim finance director for the city, and he will be presenting some bonding and financing information. And then we have Lisa Arroyo, project engineer, Jim Britch. Jim is a consultant for us, facilities management, and he's been your neighborhood liaison. And we have Tom Wagner here from Southern California Edison. So another item on our agenda will be the potential project boundary adjustments, 2 ways by which the project boundaries can be adjusted. Actually 3, but 2 primarily. One is if the neighborhood would like to propose, and there is some support, strong support with the neighborhood could actually propose some boundary adjustments. The assessment engineer, in her assessment engineer's report, her job is to ensure that all properties that receive what's termed a special benefit will be assessed, and those that don't receive a special benefit will not be assessed. And so she has say as to which properties are in or out of an assessment district. The third actually is council. City council can listen to the neighborhood and make adjustments if they deem appropriate with consultation with staff and the neighborhood. And we'll talk about next steps in the process. So we are following our steps for forming underground assessment district guidelines that are also available online, and then we'll have comments and questions. So with that, let's move forward. And our last meeting was December 1st, 2009, and I apologize in the delay of getting back to you. We did have the fires, which significantly impacted project schedule. The utility companies actually just recently provided us with their construction cost estimates and project cost estimates. So it's taken a little while for that to come together, but we've also had a couple of unanticipated delays. We did have a May 5th meeting scheduled, and that got postponed. And so here we are today to hopefully give you even more information than we would have if we had met in May. So we also gave to you a neighborhood survey with regards to some boundary issues, with regards to poles. Which side of the street would a pole terminate? Mission Street was one of the locations, and De La Vina Street was another of the locations. And we received good feedback from the neighborhood. There were results of approximately 2-to-1 on both of those issues, which led us to advance into the design, to finalize the design, and that confirmed the existing boundaries that the petition or the original petition boundary was based on. And so with regards to, and we'll show some slides as to the district boundaries. So there was no boundary expansion or contraction of the district as a result of that survey information and as a result of the utility design that resulted during the process. The survey also requested information regarding streetlights, and we'll talk in a few minutes about streetlight selection or streetlight candidates. Ultimately, we would need to go to the Architectural Board of Review for their approval of the streetlight type selection. So again, the utility designs are complete, and we do have the draft assessment engineer's report, and Joan with us here today to share that with you all. Next. Okay, now with regards to streetlights, the domus fixture on the left, that is our new city streetlight that is to replace the Cobra head fixture. You see the concrete marble light pole is similar in both situations, whether it be the Cobra head high pressure sodium light that you see commonly in town. Those are being phased out at the we did a streetlight design guidelines study, and the boards and commissions and the council approved what we call now the green domus fixture as the new style of streetlight for the city of Santa Barbara. And you've seen this around town. It's prominent around the Cottage Hospital area where there's been some new development. In other locations in town, we've recently installed them on Cliff Drive, and they're not energized there yet, but they will be in the upcoming months. But this is the new typical city style. Now, also on Chapala Street, on Lower Chapala Street, there is a city style fixture, which is called the Chapala Street Light, and it has the double glass dome, looking for the term, globe style. And the question was, what type of illumination can we expect from these types of fixtures? Clearly with the Doma style on the left, it has a cutoff lens, what's called a cutoff lens, and the light is directed only downward. It's an advantage to the existing Cobra head style, which actually allows light to diffuse sideways and upward. And so to have more efficient spread of the light, this style of fixture can put the light where it's intended to go, onto the roads and onto the intersections, so that pedestrians can be better seen, and that strategically for vehicular and cyclists and all modes of travel. The Chapala fixture, the old Chapala fixture styles had disseminated light sideways, similar to the Cobra head styles, but the new fixture within the globe is not also a cutoff style fixture, and it can disseminate light downward too. So this is a more efficient style than the older versions, and so it's considered to comply with our Santa Barbara streetlight design guidelines. And it is a historic fixture on Lower State Street, and was as a candidate for this project as well. And the survey that we had, there was strong support for the fixture. I do have the numbers here. There were, I'm sorry, I don't have them in my hand, but it was strong support for the Chapala style fixture to be on Chapala Street, and then the Doma style fixture to be on the side streets off of Chapala Street. And we'll show you a map of that, of those fixtures as well. So here it is. The proposed streetlight locations, again, these are just general, which show that there are Chapala-style streetlights in blue at intersections along Chapala Street, with one mid-block and the first block off Mission Street. There currently are 2 streetlight fixtures there now, and then we are contemplating having one mid-block to supplement the 2 that currently exist there now. So for consistency and in accordance with our city streetlight design standards, we would propose that we would have street lighting at the intersections, at every intersection. Currently, I don't believe there's a street light at every intersection. Or is there, Jim?
I don't think there is at every intersection.
Yeah, so for standards and for safety, that would be the recommendation, is to have street lights at every intersection. And then you see in green on the side streets that there would be proposed Doma-style streetlights off of Chapala Street. Okay. And so I'd like to have Joan tell you about her assessment engineer's report, including the assessment methodology. And this is an important component of the assessment engineer's report, where she's going to explain the basis for her assessments, and then she'll carry on into associated issues, including some cost information. And then Mr. Samaria will talk about financing and options for payment.
All right. Good afternoon. Good evening. First thing, just to go over very briefly, what we're funding. Now, we're funding the undergrounding of the mainline utilities that are overhead right now, and we're going to be putting those underground. So that is the trenching and installation of the vaults that need to be installed, undergrounding of those utility lines, removal of the overhead wires and poles, and repaving over the trenches. So that is actually what we're funding with this assessment district. Construction of the private service laterals, the things that are connecting to your properties, those are not included. Those are something that would be at the property owner's additional expense. So those are actually not included in the assessment. Okay, so the numbers that we're showing you do not include that information. So whenever we talk about assessments, we need to talk about Proposition 218. Proposition 218 was passed by the California voters in November of 1996. And what it did was change the rules for forming assessment districts. It changed my life. It created these new rules, and one of the things that it insisted on was a strict benefit nexus. Now, we've been doing these assessment districts for a long time. We're using the 1913 Act, the Municipal Improvement Act of 1913. So these have been around in California law for a very long time. They have always been benefit assessments. But what Proposition 218 did, it put it into the state constitution that we have to assess for only special benefits. And if there are any general benefits, that those can't be assessed. So that's right in the state constitution. Now, it doesn't define what a general benefit is or what a special benefit is, but it says that the assessment engineer needs to figure out what that is and only assess the special benefits. The other thing that Proposition 218 did was it initiated this concept of a property owner ballot. So now to form an assessment district, you have a ballot that goes to all the property owners, and the property owners actually get to vote on whether or not they want the assessment district. Okay, and I'll get into the details a little later specifically on that. Now, since November of 1996, we've been forming assessment districts a lot in the state of California. And every so often we'll have a court case that comes to light, and it'll gives us the court's perception of how we do things with the assessment, what the court's perception of what's appropriate and what's not. We went all the way till July of 2008 before having a really, truly substantive case come down, and this came down from the California Supreme Court regarding the Santa Clara County Open Space District. Now, their assessment, their ruling really emphasized the need to separate general and special benefit. It had a whole lot of other things in it, but really for other types of assessments, because this was an open space assessment, but for our type of assessment, what we really take out of it is that we need to look at the general benefits associated with the facilities and improvements that we're constructing with the undergrounding of the overhead utilities. In just last December 2009, we had another court case that was an appellate court case that came down. This one was on a utility underground district in the town of Tiburon. And there's a lot of methodology aspects of that court case that were ruled on that are directly affecting how we look at your assessment district and how we're going forward with utility undergrounding districts from now on. It gave us a different perspective. It gave us the court's perspective of what's appropriate. So we have to take these into consideration whenever we form these assessment districts and look at methodology, and that's part of what my job is, to make sure everything's fair with regard to the properties and what the court's perspectives are in applying the requirements of Proposition 218. Okay. Brief description of the proposed district. We're undergrounding the utilities on North Chapala Street from Mission to Constance. And in between that, we have the intersection streets. And so we're going up and down the intersecting streets, varying distances between State and De La Vina. We're also undergrounding all of Los Rosas Lane and American Avenue. So if you look up there, we have a map that shows basically what the boundaries are based on my benefit analysis. Now, this is a very interesting assessment district in that we have a lot of different property uses and we have a lot of property sizes. And if I go back, you can see that there's large properties, there's small properties, some of them are single-family homes, some of them are multi-family home properties, and then we have some commercial as well. So, so just taking a look at that, for single-family residences, we have about 107 parcels there. They range from 3,900 square foot lots all the way up to 13,000 square foot lots. Your multiple residential properties, properties with more than one dwelling unit on it, range from 3,500 square feet up to 15,000 square feet. And the commercial properties, 3,000 to 22,000 square feet lots. And then we have the one church property that's about 16,000 square foot lot. So we have a lot of variety. A lot of the previous districts that the city's contemplated, everything has been zoned the same. It's been up in the hills. There have been single-family homes, basically. Nothing else can be built there. They can only be built as single-family homes. In those types of situations, we can assess based on the dwelling unit. One dwelling unit gets assessed for whatever benefit. In a district like this, where you have so much variety and you can do so many things, and there's no set zoning or set way of developing, and that you have such huge parcel size ranges, usually the basis that we recommend is on a square foot basis by lot. So that is the base of the assessment district. And the idea is that, is it fair that a single-family home on a small lot is assessed the same as a single-family home on a large lot when that property on the large lot can build so much more on that property and have so much more benefit? So, and in my mind, the answer is no, it's not as fair. And so that's the basis that I'm assessing the properties, because we have such a huge variety of property sizes. So the basis of the assessment just is on the property size, the lot square footage, and we've rounded that lot square footage to the nearest 10, and that's just to equalize it out a little bit so we're not having little calculation differences. Now, the average lot in this area is 7,300 square foot. That's the average. The median lot is 6,500 square feet. So once we have this basis, then I look at how the properties actually benefit from the improvements. And I'm looking at two specific types of benefit. One is what we call the improved property access, and the other is the improved connection benefit. Realistically, most of the properties in this area benefit exactly the same, and we say that they have a total benefit factor of 1. And I'm an engineer, so I have a formula. So I say the parcel area, that lot size, times your benefit factor, 1, equals the assessed parcel area. So most of the properties were going to be assessed based on their lot size. Okay? Gotta love engineers. To get a little bit more in the improved property access benefit, this benefit is where property takes access. So this is the benefit of where they take their direct access. And it's improvement to the streetscape aesthetics. It's improvement to emergency ingress and egress. And that's that the overhead wires are totally safe, but if they happen to come down, whatever the reason, emergency equipment will not cross a down line, okay? And so there's benefit in not having those impediments, those possible impediments, so the threat of down lines and poles are removed when you remove the overhead facilities. So there's a benefit there. And again, most of the properties have the same benefit, and it's a benefit factor of 1. The exceptions are at the fringes of the district, the edges, where you have still some, what we call a riser pole. There's still going to be a pole there, and on one half of that pole, there's going to be lines going the other way. So if that pole is on the same side of the street, or basically on the street where the property takes vehicular access, we're assigning a benefit factor of 0.5 for access. If that pole is on the street where there is no vehicular access, it's maybe just your front door or something, but you have access on some other. A lot of these are corner properties. Then that benefit factor is 0.75. Okay, so that's what we're looking. And then the connection benefit is the other one, and that's any property that has that availability to be connected to these underground facilities. They're getting all new wires and equipment, and that equipment's being placed underground, and that being underground reduces the threat of service interruption only from being downed utility poles and wires. And again, accidents happen. The system is totally safe, but these things can happen, and we've seen them happen. So this is an additional benefit. Now, we see the connection benefit as a lesser benefit than the access benefit, so we assign a benefit factor of 0.5. Now, that is a map that shows the blue properties are the ones with the 0.5 access benefit factor, the half access, and then the orange ones are the 3/4 access benefit. And then the yellow property in the middle is the church, and I'll get into that in a minute. But that's just to show you that it's kind of the fringe properties at the edges are the ones that have the reduced benefit. So again, the formula, access benefit plus connection benefit factor, divided by 1.5. So again, most of the properties are going to have a 1.5. That comes up with your total benefit factor. Multiply that by the rounded parcel area, we get the assessed parcel area. Gotta love engineers, don't you? So most of the properties have 1. The fringes have less than 1 because they have a lesser benefit. And the cost is spread proportional to the total assessed parcel area. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about that church property. Church properties are a bit of an anomaly. They tend to, what I would call, kind of be underutilizing the property. This church has 1/3 of the building area is, 1/3 of the lot area is building and 2/3 is parking. And so it's basically only 1/3 utilized. And the building itself usually isn't used that much. Some Bible studies, some church services, but generally speaking, when you compare it to a home or a business, it's fairly underutilized. What we're going to do is we're going to charge this and assess it as 1/3 of the property area to calculate the assessment. But, and it's a big but, there's nothing that says that this property can't be sold in the future, that it can't develop. Right now it's made up of like 3 single-family lots. It could actually subdivide to that. If it ever does that in the next foreseeable future, probably however long the bonds are, we're going to impose a development fee on the property. So if it ever does develop, it will get hit with an assessment, a development fee that will equalize what it should be assessed, and that will actually go in and reduce the bonds for everybody and reduce the assessments. So we actually have a mechanism for that. So that's what we're planning for the church property. Now, the next item on this slide is general benefits. Now, Chapala is designated as a secondary arterial highway. And what that means is that there's through traffic on that highway. It's designated by the city as having through traffic. It's one of your main secondary arterials. So for general benefits, we need to take them into consideration. We need to quantify them. And we need to have that funding for those general benefits come outside the assessment district. So you, the property owners, are not assessed for that benefit. I've calculated, you just gotta love an engineer, 14.19% of the total design and construction costs as general benefit. And I actually have a calculation for it and everything like that. And so what that amounts to is about $577,000. And $350,000 of that comes from the utilities. They are required to make a contribution to the project. The balance of that is coming from the city, and will need to come from the city to totally fund this district, okay? So, but that, it cannot come from your assessment district. It has to come from some other source, okay? Really quickly, just the steps to formation. These are the legally required steps for forming the assessment district. We're going to finalize the engineer's report. That's the report that identifies exactly how everyone's assessment's apportioned. The City Council will approve the engineer's report and set a public hearing date. We're going to mail public hearing notices and ballots a minimum of 45 days prior to the public hearing. At the public hearing, the council will hear the property owners, hear all public testimony regarding that, and receive the ballots. And then the ballots are opened and tabulated after that. Now, the ballots are mailed out again to all affected property owners. And just as in caveat, a note, the city's contribution does not qualify them for getting a ballot. It's only if you're a property owner. So the city does not have a vote in this, okay? So the ballots are mailed out to the property owners, and the property owners get to vote yes or no. And the vote is weighted by your proposed assessment amount. This is what's stated in the state constitution. So if you have a larger lot and you have a higher assessment, your vote is that larger amount. So we look at how many dollars are assigned to your property in this assessment. The ballots are due back before the end of the public hearing, and only ballots submitted are counted, and they're sealed until after the public hearing. So the city clerk's office officiates the ballot tabulation, and by state law, 50% approval is required, weighted by those proposed assessments. So when we get all the ballots that are turned in, we open them, and we count how many dollars are yes, how many assessments yes, how many assessments are no. If there's more than 50% assessments voting no, the assessment district cannot be formed. If there is not, and that's called a majority protest. If there's no majority protest, the decision goes to the city council whether or not the district goes forward, okay? So if your district is approved, then we send you out another notice. It's called a notice of assessment, and it says, congratulations, your district is formed. You owe us this much money, and you have some choices. And we give you 30 days to make your decision, and you can pay off that amount in total if you want to. And if you do that, we'll actually give you the discount, because there's financing costs wrapped into the assessment amount. We'll discount those financing costs. So, and we'll actually tell you what that is on your notice. So you can pay it off in full, not accrue those financing costs, or you can just let it go, and the city will probably sell bonds. Mr. Samario will get into that a little later. But somehow the city will be financing the total cost of the improvements, and then once that's financed, the construction will start, and anyone who hasn't paid off their assessment, the amounts, the payments will be made for that. It's basically kind of a loan, and you're going to be making loan payments, and that will be made on your property tax bills, okay? So right now, the estimated cost of the district is a total of $4.36 million. The design construction cost is almost a little over $4 million. We subtract out that contribution that's required for general benefit. We have some incidental expenses. Those are my costs. There's a lot of legal costs that are associated with these districts. There's staff time. Those are around $192,000. And then those prepaid financing costs are estimated about $676,000. Okay? So its bottom line is $4.36 million. And then we apply that number, and we put it through my assessment formula, and 50% of the parcels, the median assessment amount, pays $29,171. Now that's 50% of the parcels will pay more or less than that. That's the median. We put them all in numerical order by amount. The 50th percent, that's the median. So $29,171. And if you want to pay that off in cash, our estimate is about $24,600 to pay that off. Now I'm giving you the ranges we have in the the different land uses. Single family residential, it ranges from the very smaller parcels, $13,000, $13,500, up to $67,000. So that's one of the really big single family home properties. Multifamily, $16,000 all the way up to $58,000. The non-residential, $15,000, $16,000, up to $114,000. That's a very large property, that $114,000. So that's kind of an anomaly. That's why we don't look at averages. That's why we look at medians, because sometimes you have these big properties. Okay. Bob?
Excuse me, Joan and Bob.
Sorry.
Maybe just a couple of points. There's a lot of information, as you've seen, and that please refer back to the tapes. The video of this when you go back, because there's just a lot of information. We'll be giving you some handout information to take with you. But I did want to touch base on a couple things, which was Ms. Cox mentioned that these figures do not include your service lateral undergrounding. That's the line that comes from the street to your house. And so we have asked a private contractor to give us estimates. We wanted to help you give to you what we believe is some good information with regards to how much will it cost to underground your service line. And so we had a private contractor do that for us, and we had to pay him for it, which is appropriate, but out of city funds, by the way, not out of funds for your project. But the results were that on the simpler, easier scenarios, it was approximately $3,000 for that. And then the highest, or the most difficult one that he could find was approximately $7,500. And this was about, several months ago now, so maybe even a year ago. But I want to share that information with you because I've heard of some people voice concerns that it'll cost tens of thousands of dollars to underground their service lateral, and we haven't seen that ourselves yet. And if you certainly have those concerns, please talk to Mr. Britch, and he can maybe help you get as accurate an estimate as you can for your property. But that's the range that we found was the $3,000 to $7,500 range from what was a contractor determined to be one of the easier ones or one of the most difficult ones. So anyway, I wanted to help give you that type of information as well. And I apologize, going back to the streetlights, is that I forgot to mention the cost of those streetlights. And so the approximate cost for the Doma style is about $9,000. And we know that because that's the price we've paid for them on the Cliff Drive project where they've been installed. And then our estimate for the Chapala style, and again, it's a different style. It's got a metal pole as opposed to the concrete pole, and they're about $15,000. And so in an order of magnitude of this project being over $4 million, there are actually comparatively minimal cost differences between the two styles when you consider the larger multi-million-dollar project. So anyway, I just want to, again, give you that. People were asking me if we could provide lighting cost estimates, and there you have it. So
and I actually have one more point. I remember listening to you before the meeting started, and a question came up regarding whether the amounts could go up. We are giving you preliminary estimates. These preliminary estimates, they definitely can go up. We're going to be bidding the project. We're going to be, getting much more finite costs if we move forward. But once the ballots go out and you have the public hearing, once those ballots are mailed, those are the assessments that are locked in. Nothing can go higher than what's on your ballot. You are being balloted a certain amount of money. And then if for any reason something needs to go up, it has to be reballoted. So nothing can go up after you're balloted for that, okay? So once the ballots go out, once that engineer's report goes to the council and the council approves it and says we're setting a public hearing, those are the assessments that are locked in. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Cox. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Samaro.
Thank you. I really just had a few comments. Ms. Cox kind of covered a lot of what I was going to cover, but it's essentially, there's a couple ways to finance these projects, but we do intend, if we move forward, to issue bonds to pay for these improvements. Then what will happen is we'll go out to the market and figure out how much is it going to cost for us to sell those bonds, and it's really based on what the interest rate is or might be at the time. We're looking potentially at an interest rate or cost of somewhere between 6% and 8%. And so when we issue those bonds, we will have to repay those over time, and it'll really be the property owners who repay those through those assessments. But the proceeds will be used to essentially fund the improvements, and then on your property tax bills every year, you will be paying an amount that corresponds to the debt service on the bonds, and for your share at least that you've essentially borrowed. So, we will also be concurring some bond costs, and we'll talk about that in a moment as to how that could impact you and your decisions on this to participate. But as Ms. Cox indicated, there are costs associated with issuing bonds that are different than if you went out and got private financing. There's bond counsel, there's underwriting costs, so there's a number of costs in there that essentially add to the overall cost of the project. So the construction itself may be one figure, but when you add all the other costs, it will add to that. It could be in the order of 5 to up to even 10% of their overall project cost. So just to keep that in mind, everybody has the option of just doing their own private financing, so not participating in the bond issue. And if they have either cash sufficient to cover the cost of their improvements, or they want to go out and get their own private financing, an equity loan on or a second on their home, they can do so. And there are some advantages to that. One being that you don't have to incur a lot of these issuance costs that you would when you're part of the bond, but there are some disadvantages as well. So that's going to be a decision you're going to have to kind of think through. Obviously, participating in the bond is a lot easier. You don't have to qualify. It becomes an assessment on your property, so it's not like having to qualify for a second loan or even refinancing your existing loan to get the money out. but those are things you have to kind of consider. I'm not sure if there's anything else I wanted to point out. I think that was really all I wanted to cover, and unless there was something else, Joan, you that we need to add on this part.
No,
If you could please hold questions. Sorry, John.
yeah,
Go ahead.
the only thing I would add is one of the things to take in consideration, if you do your financing, quote unquote, on your own, if you pay off your assessment and you have another loan, that loan then goes with you. This assessment district goes with the property. Now, if you sell the property, it's a point of negotiation with a property owner that you're going to be selling to whether or not you pay off that assessment. And you can pay it off at any time. There will be some costs incurred. There's some financing penalties and things like that. It's not a lot, but there are some additional costs. But you can pay off the assessment at any time. But you don't have to. You can leave it with the property, and then if you move away, the assessment stays with the property. It doesn't stay with you. Okay.
Thank you. Wanted to add, too, that you may have heard at previous public meetings and in our literature that the state had a provision for postponement of taxes and assessments for people over 65 years or on limited income or with disabilities. Before this last state budget approval or cycle, there was that option to if you qualified, to have postponement of your taxes and assessment. But because of the state's budget situation, that's been taken away, or that's been canceled, that mechanism for postponing taxes and bonds. So unfortunately, that's not an option now for the underground district property owners. So just wanted to report that, and that information is available online through the state, and anyone can see myself or Mr. Birch, if you'd like to get the website address for that.
And John, I did just want to point out that I did a calculation of what, people might be wondering, what's my assessment going to be based on how much my share of the project is? And for every $1,000 of assessment or cost for your share of the improvements, it works out to be an annual assessment of about $90 on your property tax bill. So if your share is $30,000, for example, you can multiply 30 times the $90, and so you can just do the math. But for every $1,000, you can expect to be assessed each year, and to be assessed half, twice a year, of course, aligning with your property tax payments, about $90. So just kind of as a point of reference. And that assumes a 20-year repayment period, which will be about what we're going to be when we issue the bonds, and a 7% interest rate, which again could vary depending on the timing of when we're selling bonds.
So just for easy math, for example, if an assessment was, say, $30,000, you take $30,000 divided by 20 years, which gives you $1,500 a year, plus the 90-some dollars a month. Is that right?
No, again,
More like principal and interest.
Principal and interest.
It's like a loan.
All right.
Right. So let me find an easier number of your share is 10,000, then you can expect to pay $900 a year each year for 20 years on your property tax bill.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Again, just a reminder that the two primary ways by which boundaries can change. And so one is that boundary changes can be made by the assessment engineer. She's determining which properties are in and which properties are out based on the special benefits or the benefits received by the project. Now, we also have a request by the 2000 block, the first block off Mission Street. Those property owners, many of them have come to us and said, is there a way we can opt out, or is there an opt-out provision? And so one of the things that we would like to have the district know is that that's one of the requests by many of the property owners here, and some are here today. And so the district as a whole, there's approximately 125 properties in the district, and so it's up to the neighborhood if they would like to consider to have that one block dropped out of the assessment district. I mean, we can consider that. And so the city is interested in hearing back from the neighborhood, and so one of the steps following this meeting will be, first of all, to give you all the information, the assessment information that we're presenting here today. And then also, we'll follow up with a straw vote on how you feel about the assessment, I'm sorry, of the first block, the 2,000 block, being out of the district. And so an immediate question comes to mind is, well, what does that mean, and what does that do to the costs? And of course, the soft costs are the same. Doesn't matter how many properties are in. Our design cost is very similar, or it's been expended to this point. And so there's some fixed costs that will remain constant. And so naturally, if a block drops off, then the costs have to be disseminated again amongst the remaining properties. However, there's a lot of merit in considering this request because we do want to keep harmony in the neighborhood. That's one of our primary goals for this district, is to ensure that when we're done, that we've done our due diligence in trying to keep the neighborhood as informed as they can, to be as responsive as we can to you, and to also have you work with each other in trying to find a solution to this issue. And so I'm sorry, I'll answer that question in a minute. I'd like to finish what I have to say. And so what we will do is to entertain exploring with the neighborhood the possibility of this. Again, what the staff will do is what the neighborhood directs us to do, or would like us to do. And so we, again, will explore that. At the request of one of the blocks of the neighborhood, we'll explore that possibility. And I'd like to work with the neighborhood here to understand how the neighborhood feels about that. And so we would like to do a straw vote. After you receive all this information regarding assessment, methodology, it's a lot of information, and so we'd like to have you digest that for several weeks. And then we'd like to send out the straw vote on the question of, how do you feel about the possibility of having the first block, or the block closest to Mission Street, be excluded as part of the district? So we'll take a neighborhood survey of that issue. And so the gentleman's question was regarding gerrymandering. It's not in my best interest to do any gerrymandering of any kind. It's in my best interest to be responsive to the neighborhood. Sir, so I'll give you the opportunity to have the mic and to comment and to ask questions. We're getting very near comment and question time, so I did want to move on, and I'm almost done. So I know that some of you have some comments and concerns, and we certainly will get to them. So again, as a reminder, this is the boundary that the petition was based on, that was submitted to the city in February of 2008, which initiated the Underground Utility Assessment District. And that was what that was the initiation of this. The next map are, in color-coded, are the changes as a result of the assessment engineer's report, which is the inclusion of the large property on the 2,000 block and the exclusion of property at the end of the project. And this is the request of the 2,000 block to consider or to get feedback of the, I'll call it a lop-off, or exclusion of the first block of the project. And so today, when we give you your assessment cost information, we'll also give you an additional attachment which shows what your assessment would be if this block was excluded, for your consideration for discussion purposes. Okay? So estimated costs without the 2,000 blocks. So there are 15 properties involved. And so we've taken a rough estimate of the cost of the project, excluding that work that would be on the 2,000 block. And we estimate that to be just under $4 million. So potentially reducing that by approximately $365,000. And so here you've seen a previous slide with a similar information of the whole project, and this is a slide of the potential costs of the district excluding the 2,000 block. And again, this is a really rough order of magnitude cost. We don't have the utility company designs that we have to date are based on their current design as a whole underground utility district, full boundary. So we're estimating, and we can pursue more definitive costs if the direction of the neighborhood is to to pursue the Lop-Off alternative. Okay, so again, getting into more numbers, we've had a previous slide, and you'll see that these costs are approximately 10% I'd use as a rule of thumb. 10% more is what I believe that we're generally or ballpark talking about that would be added to the assessments under that alternative. And so we're concluding here in our presentation, and we'll get into comments and questions in a moment. But Ms. Cox told you procedurally for the district to proceed, the steps to go to council and to bid and to balloting with the weighted vote, et cetera. But I wanted to get also into, well, what are the immediate next steps? So what things do we do next? And so, again, this video will be posted on our website at www.santabarbaracA.gov/UG, and we'll be disseminating this information to all in the district, including everybody here and everybody, all the property owners who were unable to attend today. Then we'd like, and in a few weeks after that, 2 or 3 weeks after that, we'd like to then send out a straw vote ballot based on what do you feel about, how do you feel about it? I haven't come up with the wording yet, but we'll come up with the wording to take, get some feedback with the neighborhood on how they feel about the Lop-Off provision. And so we would inform the neighborhood of the results and possibly have either another meeting or send out information to you regarding the next steps. One of the next steps could potentially be to bid the project or to follow up on the assessment engineer's report. So I'm considering that we may have another public meeting or sending out yet another straw vote weeks after the Lop-Off straw vote to talk about see where everyone's at, see what type of support for the district that we would have under the proposed alternatives. So what we want to do is keep you informed as best we can. So with that, we conclude our presentation. Is there anything else from Ms. Cox or Bob or Mr. Birch? Is that what we'll do is if we can allow the gentleman to have the mic first. He had a couple of questions, and then I'm wondering how we best do that, which is if we can just go down some order to ask questions and comments. Please, sir.
Well, I had 2 quickies. One, have you decided on which fixture yet, and if so, how?
We have, when we did the straw vote on the style of the fixture, we did get a response, and there were some, one of the, if you may recall, in the straw vote on the fixture, we were asking, would people prefer the Doma style throughout the project or the Chapala style throughout the project or a combination? That was one of the alternatives, and the strongest support we got from the neighborhood was for the slide that you saw with the mix with the Chapala style on the Chapala Street and the Doma style off of Chapala Street. So that's the best information we got back from the neighborhood. And again, before it's selected, we would go to the Architectural Board of Review and we would present to them what the neighborhood would recommend and see if the Architectural Board of Review would agree with that or recommend something else.
I see. Well, I'm in the neighborhood and I wasn't aware of a straw vote.
Okay. We mailed them to every property owner. Okay.
People actually vote on it,
I'm hearing 47 votes were or ballots were returned, 125. And it was about a 2-to-1 in favor of what's shown. So that's the best information that we have. Again, the staff is willing to go to, address the issues in response to what the neighborhood information tells us. So it goes to show you that not everybody responds to these, and I'm hearing that potentially somebody didn't get a ballot, but my information is that we have confirmation of where they were sent to, and my understanding is that we mailed them to every property owner. Okay, so can we...
The other is, I said 2, the other is this lopping off of the 2000 block. I'm really sympathetic with regard to the 2000 block wanting to get out. On the other hand, I'm not in the 2000 block, and there are 15 people in that block, or 15 residences that'll vote. And my understanding, a strong understanding, is that it's 100% they want out. And you've got one property owner that's, got a lot of points. That individual probably a lot of points. That's 10%. That's over 10% of the participants in this whatchamacall. So if I don't know who's going to decide whether they get out or not, but I'm not in that district, and if those no votes disappear, then I'm compromised as a result of it. So I can just imagine that most of everybody outside that wants this thing to pass will do whatever they can to get that 2,000 block out so that they get rid of no votes, and I find that upsetting. I'd like to see the 2,000 vote get whatever, the 2,000 block go pretty much where they want, but not at my expense or other people's expense within the remaining district. That's my question.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Couple of questions. One for Ms. Cox. Watching how you put together your engineer's spin on this thing, you seem to be not taking into account that some of those larger lots that you're going to try to charge twice as much for, those used to be R2 lots that were downzoned by the city council a number of years ago. And when they were large lots and you could build 2 units on them, that was worth something. Now you can't do that anymore. And so that's, in my case, cut the value of that property down. It didn't increase my ability to be able to spend more on your underground utility project. So that's one, and that's a potential area that I may be coming and talking to you some more about. The second one is, no, I mean, I think I could build a new kitchen for the price of this thing, and I'd much rather have that than get rid of some wires. That's a personal thing, and I'll vote no. As far as letting the people out, I go along with this gentleman here. I want to know, how do I get the 2100 block into the opt-out section? So is anybody here from the 2100 block that want to join me in trying to get in the opt-out section? Well, at least,
Sure.
at least take my block anyway. I mean,
That's an interesting perspective, and one of the things that I observed, from the city is that in the original petition, there was approximately 80% of the people on the petition that signed that they would like to explore this underground assessment district. The 2000 block only had 50% of the signatures, so there was much more support from the rest of the neighborhood for undergrounding than there was in that one block. And that's just an observation that I'm sharing with you.
The other one for Ms. Cox is that you've equated, or it seems like a completely unfair balance between the people that have multiple properties that are zoned multiple. They're paying a considerably smaller portion of the cost, when you put it up against just the single-family residential people. That doesn't seem fair, because they're getting a larger economic benefit from those properties than the single-family residential people are. So, I mean, I question that part of your calculation also.
In response, I'd like to thank you for the comments, because if people do have questions or concerns regarding the assessment engineer's methodology or assumptions or information, you're certainly welcome to talk to the consultants and staff regarding those specific issues, because for different property owners, they may have different concerns. So we'll make my support staff available to the neighborhood to pursue discussions, because there will be people saying, asking questions about the half benefit, the 3/4 points, et cetera. And so Ms. Cox will be available, and Mr. Britch. I'd like to suggest that the comments go to Mr. Britch, and he be the point of focus for the comments, so that he can gather them together for Ms. Cox, unless you prefer something different.
No, that's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Okay.
And also, just so you know, as you leave, we actually have a handout for you that states exactly my written methodology that explains a lot of this that I gave you in a synopsis format. So there's a lot of information plus a calculation sheet that shows every parcel and how each one was assigned the assessment. So all those calculations are going to be provided to you at the end of the meeting. We figured if we gave it to you ahead of the meeting, you wouldn't be listening to us. You'd be looking at your properties.
Any other comments or questions, please?
I'm June Peugeot, and I live on the 2400 block. I have actually 3 questions, but the one I'll ask right now, maybe somebody else will bring up the other ones anyway. If not, I'll maybe have a second chance. I want to stick to the same topic. I have a question as well about the 2000 block, I guess it is. One of the earlier options that I think was dismissed was to take the pole down on the other side of Mission Street. Can you just review with us the result of that idea? And I'm wondering if that has, the fact that those poles aren't going to be taken down has anything to do with that first block feeling like they want to opt out.
The result of the information that came back, there were 32 property owners that supported the pole being on the northerly side. You may recall that one of the pieces of the information that we provided was that if the pole was to be on the southerly side of Mission Street, so that the undergrounding would occur across Mission Street, I believe that was a $200,000 cost issue. Is that? Do you recall that, Jim?
Yeah, roughly
$200,000 to $250,000 cost. So not only was it just where does the pole end, but we explained the cost associated with that, and that was a primary issue, and that's one of the reasons why the cost estimate had come down. We originally we've been telling people along it's about a $4.5 million project until we have more refined cost estimates. Well, one of the reasons it came down is that if we were to go underground across Mission Street, the cost estimate would be back up to closer to $2.5 million as opposed to 4.36 where we're currently at. So the results of the straw vote, or if you will, or the response back from the neighborhood was 32 property owners that commented that the pole terminate on the north side or project side of Mission Street as opposed to the additional cost of, and so there were 15 people that responded that their preference was to have the undergrounding occur across Mission Street. So that's the results that we got. But the reason for asking the question was that the utility companies needed to know which pole to stop on. And we just relayed that there was a significant cost between the two. So again, we're doing those types of questions and straw votes for a reason to get you the best information we can with regards to cost.
But I guess actually what I'm asking is the fact that those additional poles now have to stay, not only the one across Mission, but then that meant the riser had to move, and so some of the poles on the bottom part of that block have to stay, isn't that right? On the 2000 block?
That's correct.
So I'm wondering if that was a factor in that group of people wanting to now opt out.
And I don't have that information, and we can certainly talk to the block, and maybe there's some representatives here on that block, and they would like to address or respond to that, but I don't have that information.
That was one question. And the other one is, I think if it's $200,000, at least my maybe late in the day math, that's like 0.5% of the total cost. And so I'm just wondering how significant that becomes in a parcel by parcel assessment when all is said and done.
Thank you.
It's not 250,000 when you got to add back the cost saving of 365,000. So cutting it all shorter, if you add that to cost, you're looking at more like 600,000.
I mean, for the cost of the pole removal on Mission.
Strictly pole removal cost difference was approximately $250,000 on that pole difference issue. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Gail Elbeck, and I was wondering how many of these underground utility projects have been pursued? How many fail? And commonly, do they fail because it's after the assessment and the people get the prices or the costs that they incur? What's the odds of this entire project failing compared to how many projects you have had on the books? What is the percentage of these actually finalizing or completing this?
The underground, thank you for the question. The underground utility program has been around since, I believe, 2006, 2007 is where the city initiated the program. And so there are 3 underground utility assessment districts that council has initiated. The initial one was Farello Road. And Farello Road did not get approved by the neighborhood, and so that was terminated. That underground utility assessment district was terminated, and so that one did not proceed. And now there's a second one. Tomorrow I'm going to the city council meeting, and Eucalyptus Hill Road is another assessment district that has been initiated, and staff is making a recommendation that that project be terminated also. And that one is about 33 properties, and there was strong support at the petition stage, and I believe several things happened there. There was higher than expected costs, and then the economy back in the fall of 2008 turned significantly, and although there are potential cost savings with construction work, the fact of the matter is that the economy is still in a situation where some people are out of jobs and some people can't afford things. And so those are factors that factor into the underground utility assessment district. And so I do want to add, though, that there are options if these underground utility assessment districts fail or don't move on. And I'll give you an example, and I'll have more information tomorrow at the city council meeting, because I still am gathering some of that information. But there is a area up on Mission Ridge Road where they accomplished undergrounding with, I believe it was 9 properties, where 6 properties subsidized 3 properties. That's something the city is unable to do. We have a process, and we have the regulations that we must follow as our regulated underground district process. But there's some things that neighborhoods can consider, which is to work it out. And so we try to work it out within the regulations that we are bound to with regards to our municipal process and the law, et cetera. Of course, we all need to follow the law, but my point being is that there are solutions to undergrounding, even outside these underground utility assessment districts. I just wanted to throw that out there because those are things that people are considering as well. However, there is, and it's your neighborhood's opportunity, and the neighborhood will have a voice, and the city will listen to the neighborhood. So I just want to share that with you. Those are the 3, and Chapala is the 3rd underground utility assessment district. And we're working with you to give you information.
And, one more thing, please. The ballot confirmation, who will verify that these are actually our votes?
When we send them out, we will actually send it out to the property owner according to the assessor's records. And each ballot is usually signed under penalty of perjury that they are the owner or the representative of the owner. These ballots are actually public record. This isn't an election. It's not governed by the election code. So it's actually a public record, and anybody can come in and look and see what the tally is and make sure that your vote was as you recorded it. So it is all a very public process.
When you say come into the city hall?
It would be the city clerk's office that would hold the records. Mm-hmm. Great.
So only the ballots that are returned are counted.
That's correct.
And so the ones that are not returned?
They don't count.
They don't count. You don't assume that's approval.
That is correct. Those are the old assessment rules that Proposition 218 changed. If nobody turned in a protest, everybody assumed that it was a positive, and the authors of 218 didn't like that, so they said, no, we're going to have a ballot, and we're only counting the ballots that are returned. And if they don't return, they don't count.
I guess my question here, I have a property on the first, the 2000 block right at the beginning. And my question would be for the gentleman over here, you're with Edison, aren't you? Yeah. When you figure on running in from the, where it gets stubbed off at the parkway or inside the property line to the meter, is Edison asking or going to require, like they do on new construction typically, for the meters to be moved into a more convenient place for the meter reader? In other words, if I have meters at the back of my property on the back wall, which would entail excavating up my entire driveway, which I have estimates of close to $15,000, unlike what I've heard from John of, I'd love to have his contractor for $3,000 or $7,500. But anyway, this is more electric. My son is a union electrician as well. And I'm asking, is Edison going to have us relocate the meters? Or are we going to be able to keep all the meters in the existing locations? Because most of these properties are old properties, and the meters are typically not in a friendly area. And on any remodel, Edison always makes us go underground and makes us relocate the meter. Is this, because this becomes a big cost factor change here as far as the private sector goes.
Does everyone understand his question? I'm not trying to avoid the question, but the answer will be on a site-by-site basis. All that Edison can do is ask that you conform with our electrical service requirements, basically meaning that there's a 36-inch by 36-inch flat level clearance in front of the meter location. It is readily accessible. It's not near any gas or other types of obstructions. So if it gets to this point, we would probably have to go to each individual parcel and look at the existing location. I think it's safe to say that we would certainly try to accommodate each homeowner. If it doesn't need to be moved, why incur the cost? Why ask you to incur the cost? But if there's some sort of infraction, we can give you the option of clearing the infraction or moving the panel.
Because, you know, moving the panel is also moving all the wiring and reconnecting the entire house. That's a huge project.
Yeah, that was...
Now, for instance, my house, let me ask you, will this comply with your rules? It's at the back of the house. There's a hedge in front. He's got to stand in the hedge, look down under the hedge, and read 3 meters. Does that comply with what Edison has today?
Well, without seeing the specifics, I don't think we would want to have a hedge in front of the meter panel. You would have the option, again, I don't know the site, you would have the option of moving the hedge. Is it fed from an existing underground source now, or is it overhead source?
It's underground as it sits right now.
Well, the way that I designed the project was that anything that's underground now would remain underground with the same feeder line. In your case, we wouldn't ask you to move your panel if it's already fed from an underground source.
But now my neighbor, most all the homes in Chapala obviously are old houses. They go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s. And typically they're on the back side, many of them. And you have the low wires coming in. They're on the backs or they're on the sides. And many times in new construction now, you guys want to move to the front, immediate side, or very accessible. Most of the time, not even inside of a gate. I want to know what the rule is now when all these peoples are typically at the latter part of the properties.
Well, there is no hard and fast rules about front or rear. I think just in point of discussion, Edison would certainly like the meters to be in the front of the house to avoid getting access to the meters or any dog problems now or in the future.
Okay, well, is Edison going to tell the people to move them so that and then they have to rewire their homes, or are they going to be able to leave them where they're at?
Well, I think we would take it on a case-by-case basis, and it's safe to say that we'll certainly try to work with the homeowners to keep them in the existing location.
Because I have estimates from 3 different contractors of starting of $7,000, which is simply going through the lawn, not backfilling the ditch, not providing the ditch, just doing the initial hookup with the new boxes and everything else starting at $7,000, which is the high end from what John is saying, up to $15,000. And then you need to remember, if you're tearing through your retaining walls, your driveways, your hardscape, your irrigation, that's all above that cost. So I think those costs of $3,000 to $7,500 are really on the light side. If you've done any remodeling lately, you don't get much done for $5,000. And then on the second note, just to get on to my last question, so we're done with Edison.
I'm
sorry.
here to answer any questions that anybody
No,
has.
I mean, I didn't get my question answered, but I can see you want to deal with it on an individual basis, but that's real tough for the people here trying to manage their budgets and thinking, am I going to spend this amount of money, or am I going to move my meter, or am I okay? Maybe Edison ought to go door to door and say, you're good, you're not good. You're good, you're going to move yours.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, we could certainly do that. We're not opposed to that.
Because nowadays, ever since the 07, people are counting their dollars. And this is why it's failing on the first block of 2000 block. It's the budget. It's the economy. It's losing 30% of your value of your home and then applying this to it. This is why it's not flying over so well.
Tom, if I may, I'd like to volunteer Mr. Britch to be a resource for any homeowners that are concerned about this type of issue that is being discussed with regards to meter location or additional potential costs. Certainly, my estimate numbers did not include special consideration of relocation of meters. They were simply to give people an estimate on a conventional situation, and I'm sure there's exceptions to these. And so certainly please work with Mr. Britch if you would need assistance with any individual connection issues, and I'll make him available to you to pursue the questions and concerns regarding that. There was a, thank you.
I have a question. What little research I've done on moving undergrounding just an individual residence, it seems to me that the cost of just doing it yourself is the same as this whole project. So what I'm saying is, why go to this trouble to do the whole neighborhood? Just get those individuals that want to change their lines, go ahead and do it. Because the cost is going to be about the same.
From the pole to the house, or the pole in front of the house? Or?
Pole in front of the house.
Well, yeah, I think, and we've talked about this in previous meetings, but it's important to note that this project is governed by Edison rules that we have on file with the PUC, and the rules that we have on file to underground existing overhead lines is called Rule 20, and you might have heard that, the Rule 20 project. And this project is governed under paragraph B of that rule. And there are significant advantages to that. However, there are certain limitations. And one of the limitations of a Rule 20B, as we call it, is that the project must be either 1 block or 600 feet in length. And it must incorporate both sides of the street, and all of the services in that area must be undergrounded. And in return for that, what Edison does is it gives an overhead equivalent cost that's deducted from the cost that you as customers would pay. So, for example, if a project cost $100,000 to do, and what Edison does is we also design an overhead equivalent. And traditionally, it's around 25 to 30% of an underground project. So if an underground project costs $100,000, an overhead equivalent project in that same area would cost $25,000, let's say, then you as the customers would pay $75,000. So you get that benefit, and that was reflected in some of the numbers that you saw. The other advantage that Edison provides in these 20B projects is that we remove all of the existing overhead infrastructure at our cost, which can be fairly significant. So those are the two primary benefits. Anything less than what qualifies for a 20B is called a 20C under paragraph C, and the long and short of that project is you would pay for everything. So you would not get the overhead equivalent deduction, and you would incur the cost of Edison removing the overhead facilities. So that's why these projects encompass 2 blocks, 650 feet or longer. Now this is a 6-block project, so I don't know what the total footage was, 2,500 feet, I would guess, just offhand. So that's why it requires a neighborhood.
The gentleman in the striped shirt was requesting to speak.
Hi, Glenn Minnick. You have on your benefit analysis, you have the improved property access benefit, you apply a factor of 1.0, and the connection benefit, you apply a factor of 0.5. I'm assuming that if you receive no electricity from any place on Chapala that's being undergrounded, your electricity is all coming from behind the property on poles that are not being undergrounded, that 0.5 benefit goes to zero for the property in question.
It's not just the electrical. It's electrical, telephone, and cable.
Electrical, telephone, cable,
And
everything.
if we're seeing on the plans that there's a hookup to your property, then we would assume that you have availability for that undergrounding, and that's where you would be connecting in.
Okay.
But if you do not, then yes, the connection benefit would be zero.
Okay, because I have no electrical connection of any utilities of any kind on any of the poles that are being undergrounded on Chapala. All of mine come from Los Olivos on poles that are not being touched. So, okay, I'll look for my 0% benefit on that. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Two right here.
Okay. My name's Joel, and I'm from the Quakers. And I'd like to know about the previous survey, because nobody was, we're a small group, and they didn't seem to be, some of the members weren't aware of the first survey. I mean, I wasn't told about any voting or anything, and I don't like the idea of people, I think you should, it seems fair that you should, people have to be recognized whether they voted or not. I mean, so, but I realize that it's just a survey, and eventually it's going to be a more legitimate process with signing your name and stuff. But could you tell me when you mentioned the survey that was done? Oh, I'm in the 2000 block, just to let people know.
Well, the 2000 block survey hasn't been conducted yet. We'll follow up with that with regards to how do people feel, how does the neighborhood feel about the idea of the opting out or lopping off of the 2000 block. Clearly, I'm hoping the neighborhood understands, clearly that block has some very strong support within that block. And so that's why the city, we're entertaining that and posing the question to the rest of the neighborhood. Now that you know that the 2000 block has a strong, I've heard someone say unanimous. I don't know if it's unanimous or not, but I've heard that, or near unanimous.
When did you contact? I don't. It doesn't seem to me that there's a connection between the Quakers and whoever. How do you know that? How do you know what position the Quakers is?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with
the 2012. It's 2012.
Okay. And I'm sorry again. We were approached by several members of that block that claimed that they had talked to their neighbors, and so that's why we are interested in validating that concern, which is how does the neighborhood feel about that? So there's an apparent, I guess I should call it an apparent, strong concern by the 2000
Well, not
block.
necessarily. I mean, don't you have to? You have to get everybody. I mean,
we'll find that out.
Okay.
We'll find that out. So that's what the straw vote will accomplish, or try to accomplish, which is how does the neighborhood feel, including everyone on the 2000 block. Will get the opportunity to voice their opinion. So we're interested in hearing back from the neighborhood as to how they feel about those issues, and that may lend to either additional meetings or additional questions or towards resolution of that issue.
Okay.
Just. Oh, sorry, Ms. Elba, could you please ask it on the, thank you, Mr. Pruchot.
So what was just mentioned was that Edison, the underlying utility project, could be considered just block by block.
Well, we have a project before us that council has expended a significant amount of city funds to pursue on behalf of the neighborhood's petition request. And so I'm really hoping, as one of the facilitators, and to be working with the neighborhood on this project. And if the project has some nuances or questions or issues to pursue, pertaining to the whole, I'm entertaining that. But I'm really seriously doubting that we'll be entertaining a block-by-block pursuit because we have a project in front of us. And so we should be looking at the project as the whole with some caveats or exceptions, minor exceptions and caveats, due to design details, which we posed out a straw vote to the neighborhood, with the logical of which pole do we end on. I think that was very logical as to we just needed to know where the design would stop and the cost implications of that. But we're generally pursuing this general boundary of the whole underground utility assessment district that was initiated at a council level. So council at a previous meeting, not a Chapala underground assessment district meeting, but a previous meeting where we talked about issues associated with the undergrounding program, I was given some comments from some council members, and some are still on the council, which was to work with the neighborhood and to pursue options if people were concerned about the costs and if there was strong support in the lop-off concept. And so that's what I feel we're doing, is pursuing it to the degree that is reasonable. And I think this is a reasonable request because it is an end block. I think it would be a different story if the request was from a mid-block of the project. Then it wouldn't make sense to me to entertain it to this degree as it does to consider it, considering there may be, and again, potentially, a strong opposition on the one block. So I'm doing my best to facilitate this process with you, the neighborhood, and I appreciate your cooperation in this regard, and staff will certainly work with you on what we believe is viable options to move forward. And so I'm not in favor of pursuing a block by block because what's before us is the whole. Does that help you?
So yes, it comes down to that final vote, the final ballot. So
the weighted ballot
we
in the
really
end.
need to just see what happens, I think, at that point.
As I mentioned, we've expended a lot of time and effort into getting to this point, and that we are working towards a conclusion of this project. And so, again, we're providing the best information, and I think we've covered most of the things, but I'd like to have Mr. Peugeot please speak. He was next.
When do the ballots come out? I mean, will we have them soon, or?
The weighted ballots, the very end? I'll respond to that. The weighted ballots.
It would be after the city council acts to formally move forward with the assessment district. So it would be after all your straw ballots and everything like that. And then, John?
It would be after we would bid the project first. We would get a real bid in hand from a contractor, and then we would finalize the assessment engineer's report based on those real costs. Right now we have projected costs or estimated costs. We would have contract costs, and the numbers would be adjusted in accordance with the bid rather than the estimate, and then the weighted vote ballots would be sent out after the city council would approve the assessment engineer's report.
To move forward, there's not an initial vote now after the assessment? We have to wait till the final?
No, thank you. I think that you're getting to the point that I was expecting, which is, and let me use the Eucalyptus Hill Assessment District as an example. We got to the Eucalyptus Assessment District point where you are at now, which is the estimated cost. And then we believe that we did everything except bid the project. When we get to that point, we will, in accordance with our process guide that is online and in our municipal code, we will send out a straw vote to the neighborhood to get a determination what the level of support is for moving forward with this project and to add more expense and cost and process to bid the project. So before we bid the project, we will have a straw vote with the neighborhood to get an indication of the level of support from the neighborhood. With Eucalyptus Hill, there was a strong majority in opposition of bidding the project and doing any more work. And so tomorrow, that's what's before the city council, is to consider ending that district. Okay, does that answer you? Thank you.
Yes, good evening. I'm Alex Peugeot. I live with June on the 2400 block. I have two questions, one regarding the assessment methodology and the other one regarding timing. Regarding the methodology, you say that you evaluate access and then connection benefits, right? Those are the two main
Those are
points.
the two types of benefits, and they're not equal weight. The
Right, no,
access is 1, and the connection is 0.5.
Now, how do you evaluate, let's say, the visual benefits? And some are obviously different from others. I'm just curious. Like they are heavier on some part of the streets, like Los Olivos has an enormous amount of wiring. Then maybe Las Rosas or some of the other ones have much less. The first block has more wires. The last block has very few. So amount of poles? Some properties have 3 poles in front. Some have. How does that work?
Actually, we just look at the benefit is aesthetics, and we're looking, is there a benefit from having those removed? It's not how many poles necessarily. Up in the Eucalyptus Hills area, they were up in the hills, and actually some wires and poles were in their viewscape. And so we actually gave them, there was an additional benefit of a scenic view benefit that was in addition to the access benefit and the connection benefit. So they actually got another level of benefit that was tacked on. In your district, you don't have those scenic view considerations, so it's more streetscape aesthetics, and just removing those wires and poles is a streetscape aesthetic benefit. And so we really looked at that as very similar to each property, not necessarily numbers of poles and things like that.
Okay, so another quick question. Because the benefit, the assessment cannot go up. I mean, once you vote, that's your number. By force, you're going to have to estimate this a little bit higher, maybe 15% higher, because, just in case.
Absolutely.
So is there a rebate in case the price?
Actually, there is. The city council has a couple of options. After the improvements are all constructed and everything's done, if there's still money left in the construction fund, there are some options the city council has. If it's a fairly small amount, then they can do some things. But if there's a decent amount, if it's 15%, a lot of times they'll give that back. They'll call the bonds and they'll rebate that money back to the property owners, to the properties that paid their assessments off. So you will get that. But it's after everything is done, and then they'll make that determination.
And I have a more important question, I think, and it has to do with timing, because as you know, this process was very long. We think we started in 2008 on preliminary studies, and then 2009, and we took one vote, and then something else, and those were different times. In those times, I used to get in the mail maybe 3 credit cards offers, and any one of them I could put the $30,000, and and it will go away. And now we are in very difficult times. I mean, in my business, things are really terrible, and I know the electricians and everybody else. And we also know that, well, things change, and just like it happened in 91 and in 81 and so forth. Well, 91, then by 95, 96, things were completely different. And we started this process on an economic high, and now we are in the darkest hole, and it's hard to imagine people coming up with this kind of money. So the question is, well, does it have to be done now? Can we just wait a little bit to the time where we start seeing, at least the light at the end of the tunnel, when the recovery is starting to turn around? I mean, because this is really a very, very difficult time. And what's guiding this? Because it really is, this is the Titanic hitting the iceberg, and maybe the Titanic could change course and do something else. Thank you.
Mr. Peugeot, the City Council had this type of discussion when we had the Farello undergrounding assessment district, where that was terminated. And that was one of the questions that was a point of discussion. And so the council indicated then that they would need some strong show of neighborhood support to reinitiate a project to be reconsidered. And so the consistent message that I have from the city council meetings has been strong neighborhood support. And there isn't a number, there isn't a percentage. It's just so you know, I'm not sure how many votes it takes to get one approved or get denied, but the point being is that the neighborhood worked together to get to a resolution. And so whether the project moves forward or whether it doesn't, most of you will still be neighbors for a very long, long time. And so it's important for the neighborhood to, as best we can, work together to talk about how we can address the issues. It's how we address them and respond to them is one of my primary concerns. And so if a project is, like tomorrow, my recommendation, the staff recommendation is to suspend or terminate the project. It doesn't mean it's dead forever. But one of the points the council made was that if it was ever to come back, then the neighborhood is being asked to show a very strong support.
But the question is, why bring it to this point now? I mean, as you know, in the past we asked, well, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking, that was in 2008 and 2009? Oh gosh, why is it taking so long?
Right.
Now the question is the opposite. Why is it going so fast in the worst possible economic time?
Timing is everything, I suppose, is one response. But in fairness to all, we just received the final estimated numbers from the utility companies. They were significantly impacted by all the fires that we've had, and that alone has delayed this process many, many months. In our guide that we referred to, the underground utility guide that we published, we have time frames on each a line item of the process, and this really is in line with the maximum of those time frames. So the message we tell people is it does take years. It is a time-consuming process. And another factor here is that there have been significant funds expended, and so we don't have an endless supply of funds to continue moving, to continue to keep this going. And so one of the goals is to get you the information, the best information that we have. And we can continue to talk about this issue, but certainly with eucalyptus, I'm hearing from that neighborhood and that a year from now, 2 years from now, it may likely be the same answer. They just now understand the process and they now understand the general cost better than they did initially. And so we can certainly talk about that a little bit more, but I think the reality of it is that people have been better educated through this process, and now many have made up their mind and will have an indication of what the neighborhood thinks. What you can do is to help me is to give me your comments and concerns, or Mr. Brich, your comments and concerns about your issues so that we can pose the right questions to the neighborhood.
I have a technical follow-up question on this one. Can you just tell me in general, when you go out to bid, how long is that bid good for before you'd have to go out and rebid it? And then from the point of accepting a bid, when would a property owner expect to see their first assessment on their property tax?
Okay, going to the bid, typically we have contractors hold their bids for a period of time, for example, 90 days or something like that. But in this case, we know that we would need many months in order for them to hold their bid because we would have to arrange for the financing. And that will take several months to pull that all together. And so we anticipate, we've done some initial research on this, and we anticipate that the bidding process, by time that we would get bids and ask them to hold bids, it would be in that 5 to 6 month range where they would need to hold bids for us to be able to, is that your experience too, Ms. Cox?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we want them to hold it through this assessment process, and we have to be able to have a certain, an amount certain, so that our assessments are good.
So I believe that we're talking about a potential of a 5 to 6 month period before we would have the final vote, weighted vote time frame. Again, I believe that it may be spelled out in our process guide, some of those time frames. I don't have that memorized, but I believe some of that information is there, and if it isn't, we can certainly get some of that information to you.
Because we have to go the engineer's report finalized, we have to go through that balloting process, that's 45 days after the council acts, so that's about a 2-month process. There's the 30-day cash payment period, and then there's another, say, 30 days for selling the bonds. So there's a certain amount of time, and it's not really when the amount goes on your property tax bill, it's when the bonds get funded and the project gets funded. We can only put the assessments on your property tax bills once a year. that's basically August 10th is when the auditor controller accepts it from the county. So they'll go on, if we miss that August 10th date, it'll be on for the next year. But, so it's not really when that goes. It really depends on when everything gets funded and how we can get it on your tax bills. Okay?
Any other comments and questions?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've probably spoken enough. But I'm in league over here. My name's Kurt, and I live up at Quinto in Chapala. And there are quite a few rental properties down in that 2000 block of Chapala, and a lot of absentee owners. You know, the owners live elsewhere, some out of the state. And I was curious, at the initial, and this gentleman apparently, you know, wasn't spoken to when the survey was taken. And I wonder, with all those rental properties, and the next property, or the next block as well, has got quite a few, and the same further up Chapala has got a bunch of, you know, a lot of rentals, as one might expect. And those aren't occupied by owners. So what I wondered was how those places were surveyed, how they got those. Did they go out of town to speak to the owner? Did they go down to the city and get the owner's address and contact them that way? Or did they kind of slide over? Because with an 80-20 approval rate on that initial study, I did, you know, it's just, I wonder about it. The other thing I wondered about the second comment is,
Excuse me, sir, could you talk into the mic, please? I'm having difficulty hearing you.
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I wondered about that 80-20 and how many people. So Saturday and Sunday, I waltzed out. I wanted to meet people and so forth. And I got to tell you, folks, this is a wonderful neighborhood. I mean, really. You got all kinds of people. And most importantly of all, it's middle class. It's middle class America. It's all about this country. And so as I walked, Jenny and I, and we spoke to, to get a sense of what was going on, not only were there a lot of people that it didn't reflect that 80-20 by a long shot, and perhaps there's some of what Alex is talking about regarding the county, with a 30% devaluation of homes, and you add the expense of this UUAD to that, you're going to put a lot of people, I think, underground. You're going to flip them. And it's not just an age-sensitive demographic we're talking about. I remember Alex saying older people are going to have a bitter pill to swallow, which struck me as not all that neighborly. But I saw that on one of the tapes. And it goes far beyond that. There are young owners that have purchased at the top of the market, you know, 207, 206 or so forth, and their taxes are unbelievable compared to those that have purchased years before. That individual those individuals may, and I met some of them, may be close to having serious problems. You tack this other thing on them, and it's gonna flip them. Older people are really sensitive to that. I mean, they're hand to mouth as it is, and and the younger guys, you know, their equity credit line has dried up. If they've had the 401ks and the IRAs, those things have gone to hell. The stocks they own have gone to hell. Everybody's been cut in half. So it'd be nice to put this thing off, but I think if we go ahead with this, we're going to put a lot of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people underground, and we'll no longer have the neighborhood you want to improve. A lot of those people will disappear, and I don't want to be a part of that. I could probably scrape together, you know, what's coming down the line if it comes. But the point is that a lot of them, and they are wonderful people. And when I walked around, I got invited into houses. I couldn't stay on the street. I couldn't stay on the porch. They wanted to come in and talk. Sweethearts. And the last thing in the world, I want to say, well, that's a bitter pill. You're going to have to just suck it up and live through it. And I wonder if the city really wants to get involved with that kind of risk, with those kind of consequences. Perhaps, and I think those that want to do this should. I think it's a worthwhile thing regarding the pros on this. I think if you've got the ability and you want to do something, you're not, well, the caveat is you're not hurting others or dragging people along with you who don't have the same dream, the same vision. Moreover, they can't afford it. A lot of people like that out there. I just don't know when to shut my big mouth sometimes.
Well, I want to, may, sir, if I may. Sir, if I may, sir, I think your point's well taken, but I'd like to respond to the first part of your question regarding the petition and verification. When the petition was submitted, our staff verified with the county the property owners so that we confirmed that the property owners that were listed on the petition were the property owners. So when we talk about renters and the like, they come and go generally, and over time they will. But certain, I'm sorry? The process was followed. I can tell you that the process was followed that is required, and we are doing our best now to talk to and outreach to as many property owners as we can. I can't tell you if the people who submitted the petition, how much they conversed with the owners, but once the ball became in the city's court, I believe our staff did an admirable job of disseminating information to the best of our ability with the resources that we have. So I know that we can talk about this a lot longer, but I'm hoping that the next comments can be something, either new information or new concerns, or if people haven't had an opportunity to speak, I'd certainly like to give everyone the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
John, just a point of clarification. When you sent out the surveys, you sent them to the property owners. It was by mail, correct?
That's correct. The property owners that the list of property owners that we had verified through the county. Again, property owners changed too, and so when we do mailouts, we try and verify the latest property owners as well. And sometimes we get mail back, and then we know something's changed, and then we do our best to contact the property owner if we do get mail back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Bill Weil. I live in the 2500 block of Chapala, and I'd like to thank the city. I think you've handled this very professionally. I think people will always have disagreements over something like this, but I think you have provided the information. The mailings have gone out. It has been delayed and all of that, but I'm very pleased with the way the process is going. You can vote one way or the other. That's the reason you have a vote. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question? Not last question.
Did I understand that you were going to take a straw poll before you get the final bid?
Oh, absolutely. There'll be a couple straw polls as I see it. One will be we'll send out some information. We'll send out this information to all the people. The majority of the people aren't here, 125 property owners, and we'll send out the information that was disseminated today with minutes, with handouts, with the strongly encouraging them to review this video, especially for the PowerPoint presentation, because we've taken more time now talking about it than our presentation was. But after that, then I foresee that we would want to get some information back from the neighborhood regarding the issue of the 2000 block, whether the neighborhood is interested in working with the 2000 block, if that is the 2000 block's concern of requesting to be lopped off or excluded. And so that's the first straw vote. The second, after we get all the questions answered regarding the methodology and the numbers associated with each property, that everybody will give the opportunity to ask questions and to get as much information as we can practically provide to them. Then we would, before bidding the project, put out another straw vote like what we did for eucalyptus to find out if the level of support from the neighborhood for the project, and be it the shortened boundary or the full boundary, depending on what the neighborhood would like to do. I, as the facilitator, is interested in hearing from the neighborhood.
My question has to do with the financing options. We heard two basic ones today: float the bond over a 20-year period or cash out. there must be some, I would assume, permutations of those options that might be available. My first on my list is, what about a 30-year amortization or a 40-year amortization on those bonds? And then my other ones would be, can you pay part cash and then amortize the rest? Can you, well, I guess let's just leave it at those two.
Thank you. Bob, first on the 30-year.
Yeah, I guess I'm not really sure whether it's typical. It's typically below 30 years. 30 years is typically a maximum that we go. I spoke to our financial advisors, of people who we use whenever we issue bonds, and they said that typically we would go 20 to 25 years on these bonds. Going 30 years is probably something we could do. I guess it would probably be up to the property owners, but it typically at 20 to 25 years. So I'd have to kind of get back to you on that question as to whether we can go longer even than 30 years on this kind of a bond issue. I know they kind of like to match the term of the bonds with the sort of the life of the asset, the useful life of the improvements in this case. So, for example, we wouldn't want to do a 20-year bond when the improvements life may only be 5 years and vice versa. So I think a lot of it has to do with matching the life of the asset with the term of the bonds. But I'll get back to you on that one. In terms of I guess the other question was on...
Can you pay part cash?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then amortize the rest?
You can pay a partial payment during the 30 days and have that reduced amount, absolutely. And just a point of note on the, we're probably issuing the bonds under the 1915 Act law. It's not like these have been on the books for a long time. It'd be the 1915 Act bonds. And under the 1915 Act, I believe that there is a limitation of 40 years. It can't be longer than 40 years.
So I guess my follow-up questions would be, one, when can we hear back? Because I think we've asked this question for several months, waiting for an answer about the amortization period. And I think it's important to us, and we would like to know that answer. So I'd like maybe a commitment of when we could hear that answer. And then secondly, if you're going to give estimates to us, I mean, when do we decide on that amortization period? Would it be property owner by property owner? Do we have to decide that now? I mean, we'll have some effect on the estimate of what you send out as far as like what you'll have to pay every year on your taxes.
Wow. Whether or not it's, I don't know, and John,
You can try
that,
it, and
that
maybe with Mr.
bond
Samaras,
term, I don't know how
I think the city would determine, or at least provide information to the neighborhood, but ultimately, I believe it's a city determination. Would you?
I'm not really sure. Again, I think it's a question of whether the market and whether it's typically to go out 40 years is going to make sense of this particular project. We can talk to our advisors this week and get back the answer to John or to Joan about whether 40 years is even a possibility. And then it's really up to I presume, the property owners or the city to make the determination as to, are we going to do a 40-year bond, a 30-year bond, 20-year bond, and all that stuff.
We can certainly make that one of the...
owners? You mean one by one?
No, sorry.
as a group.
I
It'll
would
be the
consider
project.
doing a straw vote on that topic then, as to, just like we did with the design and the streetlights, just let's see what the property owners, how they feel about that.
And the one thing to remember, this is kind of like a loan, so if it goes out longer, you're paying more interest. So there is going to be interest on that. And that's the difficult part about coming up with an amount that's going to be on your property tax bill. Until we sell those bonds, we have no idea what the bond interest rate is going to be. So we can give you estimates. This is what we think it's going to be right now, but we have no idea of how much that interest rate's going to be until we actually sell the bonds.
And there's one more option, that is or property owners can arrange for personal financing. So perhaps they can get a better interest rate once you know the terms of the city process, that perhaps the property owners can arrange for personal financing. So that's an option to consider. I want to thank you all for your attentiveness. We can tell that you've all genuinely been interested and receptive to the information that we provide. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much for coming. And staff will be here for a few more minutes. If you'd like to do some of this discussion offline, we'll be here for a short time. Lisa will hand out the information packets to you before you leave. Please do take one before you leave, but we will we'll ensure that everyone gets a copy.
And these have your specific assessments on them. So this is how we calculated your assessment.
And please keep in mind that there'll be one copy that will say with the full project, and there's also a second handout that has estimated numbers based on if the 2000 block was not considered. So it gives you an idea of the difference between the two for consideration. Thank you very much, and good evening to all.